Pranam, Jai Janendra, everybody. We'll start with the class right away with the slides. We got a bit of a problem with putting on the beginning slides, but we'll have the slides at the end. So let's start with the Pratna. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Utsayanam, Namo Loe Sappasahunam. एसो पंचनमुक्कारो सप्प पाव पणासनो मंगलानंच सब्बे परमं हवहि मंगलम् नमो अरिहंताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयरियाणं नमो उत्सायाणं नमो लोये सप्प साहुणम् एसो पंचनमुक्कारो सप्प पाव पणासनो मंगलानंच सब्बे परमं हवहि मंगलम् नमो अरिहंताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयरियाणं नमो उत्सायाणं नमो लोये सब्ब साहुणम् एसो पंचनमुक्कारो सप्प पावपणासनो मंगलानंच सब्बे सिंपटमं हवै मंगलम् वीर सरसुरा सुरेंद्र महितो वीरमुदा संस्कृता वीरेणाभिहत स्वकर्म निश्चयो वीराय नित्यं नमः वीरातीर्थमिदं प्रौतमतुलं वीरशिखोरं तपो वीरे श्रीधृतिकीर्तिकान्तिनिश्चय श्रीवीरभद्रं दिश कमठे धरणेन्द्र च शोषितं कर्म कुर्वते प्रभुस्तुल्य मनोवृत्ति पार्श्वनाथ श्रीस्तु वः अंगूठे अमृतवसे लब्धितणा भंडार श्री गुरु गौतम समरिये मनवंश वांछित फलदाता. Welcome everybody. I hope you all had a very good Purushana Aradhana and you're all now fresh. You had a break for about a month now. Unfortunately, last week I had to go away, so we couldn't start last week, but we're all here now. Okay. It's been a month since we ended the class, about a couple of weeks before Purushana started. Does anyone want to summarize and remind everybody where we left off with? I know some of you have been making notes. No? Okay. The topic, as you all know, is Nav Tatva. We've been learning about Nav Tatva for several weeks now. We have looked at the reason why this subject is important. We've looked at the focus of understanding the nature of the soul, that is who we are, and understanding what our relationship to the world outside is like, and to understand that the current situation in which we find ourselves is truly different from what our true nature is. And Nav Tattva, the study of Nav Tattva, helps us understand how we got ourselves into this situation where we are, where all the Jeeves who are not in moksha in the universe are, and the reasons behind this state where the true nature of the soul, the true nature of eternal bliss and happiness, of total knowledge and complete independence, and a permanently happy state which is free from any kind of changes, and it is free from any pain, any suffering, and it is permanent. Now, some of the reasons why we have got ourselves into this state, the most important reason is that we have forgotten who we are, and we have over many infinite lifetimes concentrated on focusing ourselves and our energies onto something that is not of ourselves. We have focused on that which is completely separate from us, and we have identified ourselves with that which is not of us, of ourselves. So we have basically thought of ourselves as the body, we have thought of ourselves as completely part of the society that we find ourselves in, and have identified with everything that goes on around us. And we have identified ourselves with things, positions, personalities that are all temporary and not our true nature. And in that process, as long as we keep on identifying with the outside, we continue to attract karmas and we continue to accumulate them. And because the original sin, if we look at the Christian concept of the sin, the original sin was what? Anybody who has some knowledge of Christianity? What is the original sin that uh, Adam and Eve committed that ended up with the life of eternal damnation from paradise and fall from paradise? My understanding is that the original sin was the eating of the forbidden apple. Now, if you look at that as a metaphor, being attracted to something that was outside, which looked very attractive, and forgetting who we truly are, and then engaging with something that is not of ourselves, led to the downfall. Obviously, as we know, that Jain Dharma says that the soul has always been in this situation from Nigodh, and that is where we all start. And in that state, there never was an understanding, and the level of unhappiness and the accumulation of karma, the burden of karmas was massive and huge, And over this many lifetimes, we have slowly got rid of a certain level of karmas and have been successful enough to attain a human life, to have an understanding and an interest in learning about dharma, and have some inclination towards our own progress. And if you wanted to make this fortunate position that we find ourselves in, so that we continue to make progress in future lives, then we need to make the most of what facilities we have, meaning that we need to try and understand who we are, how we got into the situation, and how we can get out of it and move towards our ultimate goal of emancipation, moksha, nirvana. Okay. The If you look at one definition of dharma, which actually goes to the heart of what, and it helps us understand everything that we do much better. So, all the aradhana that we do is meant to lead us to this particular definition. Anybody, how is dharma defined in general terms? What is dharma? Dharma of a particular dravya is its true nature. So, વસ્તુનો જે સ્વભાવ છે એ એનો ધર્મ છે. Meaning, the true nature of any particular element is its dharma. So, all the activities that we do, if they are going to lead us towards the practice of dharma, then they need to be leading us towards our understanding and identification with our true nature. Anything that takes us away from our true nature is therefore defined as against dharma. So, our true nature is completely benevolent. Our true nature is completely detached, meaning that we would be aware of everything, we would know. The soul is all knowing. But in the knowledge of everything that is going on in the universe, that was there in the past and that will happen in the future, in this state of total knowledge, the soul remains in its free state in moksha, or after achieving Keval Gnan, completely detached from everything being that is known to the soul, and that is everything. And within that total knowledge, there is an experience, a permanent experience of total bliss. So there is no anger, there is no greed, there is no desire, no need to pursue anything else. And that state is of permanent peace, of permanent bliss, and of total disengagement from everything else that's going on around. During Paryushan, when we were as part of the regular practice during Paryushan, we read the Kalp Sutra over the 8 days. And one particular very inspiring, or two particular very inspiring pravachans given by one great Acharya, Bhakti Yogacharya Shuvijay and Param Pujya Panyas Labdhi Vallabh Vijayji, and I was listening to them, and they were explaining the nature of Bhagwan Mahavir's state of being at the time of taking Diksha. And what they described is that from that moment onwards, as soon as the all the clothes of his life as a prince prior to becoming a monk, as he's discarding all the clothes, all the other paraphernalia, discarding and giving and uh, going away from all the relatives, all the well wishes, all the people of the country who he had spent uh, his childhood, youth, until the age of 30, all the family members, leaving them all behind and walking out alone with a completely bald head that he had removed himself uh, with loach. And the way they describe this state and the feeling of Bhagwan Mahavir's detachment and the total focus on himself. And a statement is made that during the 12.5 years that Bhagwan Mahavir actually spent in meditation and penance and the different experiences that he had, he does not lose that total, complete focus on being within the moment and being present with himself and not interested or focusing on anything else. And there is one particular incident that is, I think, quite an eye opener for us, is that Bhagwan Mahavir, from the time of birth, had Audhignan. From the day that he took Diksha, he also developed Manparyavagnan, which allowed him to read the thoughts of all the people, animals who had mind, who had the ability to think, and he could read the thoughts of all that. And along the way, in those years, he met people that he had known. He made no attempts to actually seek society. He made no attempts to engage in chit chat or ordinary conversation. He had no interest in anything else. His total focus was his soul, and he stayed within his soul at every moment of those 12.5 years. So the definition of samta, samaik, is actually to stay within the moment and not think about what's happened in the past, what's happening in the future. So the whole concept of planning things, of reviewing things, of anticipating things, of uh, making, evaluating what has happened in the past, that is all completely stopped. All that mental activity that we go through on a day-to-day basis is called vikalp. And that vikalp was something that he did not engage in from the moment that he entered the life of a monk. And in terms of achieving an understanding of our true selves, that is where he starts. So during the state of samayik, of becoming a monk, he is totally detached from everything else, and he is in total samayik, total samta, and it is in that state there the influx of new karmas is stopped. So ashrav is stopped. All the karmas that were bound before are slowly and exponentially being rid of. During the process, he suffers from many, many different severe difficulties that all kinds of people and animals and different places uh, make all kinds of people who, for their own reasons, for the reasons of the association with past lives and the karmas that Mahavir Bhagwan had to suffer, and all those things are constantly aiding him to get rid of those karmas, but his total disengagement from any of those very, very painful things that were happening to him is something that we hear about during Paryushan when the reading of the Kalp Sutra on an annual basis. And we need to continue to engage and understand what that actually meant. Those 12.5 years was a massive effort to get rid of all the karmas. So karmas, nirjara was being conducted on a massive scale. All the karmas that could not be modified, so there is karmas which were nikachit, like the ones where the Gowal puts nails in his ears. All those nikachit karmas that would not disappear with penance, he suffered completely silently and with equanimity. So Nav Tatva teaches us that you first stop the influx of karmas. So you settle in a state of being within the moment and completely detached from that which is not outside and stay within yourselves. So you're stopping the influx of new karmas. And as you progress, you get rid of all those karmas that you have accumulated, that you've bound. You stop the influx and you stop the bandh of karmas. And then ultimately, when you got rid of all the karmas, then you get to moksha. And that process of the elevation of the soul is called Gunsthan. And we all start with the first Gunsthan, that is Mithyatva, meaning even though it is a very basic step, it is still considered to be a Gunsthan for people, as because that is where we all start off with. But when we begin to develop an understanding, then we slowly move forward towards the fourth Gunsthan from the first, and we'll come to that at some time in the future. I'll now share my slides. This is just a summary of what we have been learning, but the slides that I'm sharing today are exactly the same slides as of the 20th of August as a reminder, but we'll start with the last slide and move on from there. But if there are any questions meanwhile, just let me know. Give me 1 second. Okay. Any questions before we go on? Anything you want to share about your experiences doing Paryushan? You can switch on your videos if you want. Anybody? Have I got your ears?
Ajitbhai, are you able to repeat the question, please?
Any thoughts on um, any questions at all? I'm not asking a specific question.
Sorry.
I'm just uh, giving you a stop to think, and anything you may want to share of anything about pollution or about our current topic, and then we move on. 11.
Shilaben, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I haven't got anything to share because the
Okay.
Paryushan was really nice, and I think we did feel a little, there was something about it where we haven't experienced until now, and more understanding of the sutras,
Good.
but nothing else more than that.
All right. So let's carry on. Is Now I'm just going to move down. So very briefly, these are the sets of slides that we started with the uh, uh, talks on Ajiv. We started off with Pudgal, Punya Pap. We spent some time on discussing the various types of Punya and Pap, Ashrav, Then we went on to discussing the 8 different categories of karma and what quality of the soul they obstruct. At this juncture, I wanted to move us on to the next stage, and I'll make some slides on this and add them onto next week's slides. So we can discuss all this again in further detail. Whenever we engage, the soul engages in any activity that attracts karma, and so it's basically the metaphor is that you are leaving your windows and your doors open so that the dust actually enters the house. And then as the dust comes in, it settles down in various places and becomes part of the walls, the doors, the windows, and settles down on the things that we got inside the house. Similarly, when we've left the doors open for karma to enter, so we've engaged in ashrav, we looked at the reasons for that earlier. Then these karmas bind to the soul. In some ways, that is how it is described, but in fact, the soul always remains separate from the karmas. So the karmas don't actually become the soul, and the soul doesn't become the karmas. They are two different dravyas. But the soul has given the power to the karma to basically influence the soul's experience in many different ways. And the influence of the karmas, Nick is asking, did you understand correctly that the first gunsthan is mithyatva, but we are in the fourth? No, we are not in the fourth. What I was saying, we may be, some of us, I don't know. It's something that only a Kevali Bhagwant would know for sure. But the fourth gunsthan is at the beginning when we achieve the state of samyaktva. We all start off with mithyatva, but the degree of mithyatva can vary. And as the soul progresses towards samyaktva over many lifetimes, and it gets to a state where it actually gets rid of the severe, great Gordian knot of rag and dvesh, and then for the first time, for the first time ever in its journey, the soul gets to a state of an understanding of its true nature, of the right God, of the right Guru, the right Dharma, and then that particular state of enlightenment may not last very long, but if that is at the level of samyaktva, that is the fourth gunsthan, avirat samyakdrasti gunsthan, that is the fourth. The second and the third are the gunsthan that the soul actually experiences on the way down. So if the soul has achieved a higher gunsthan and then falls again and goes back to mithyatva, that does happen as well often. Then on the way down, the soul gets to stages two, usually, sometimes two for a very brief moment, three and two, and then gets back into the state of mithyatva. But whether any one of us have actually ever achieved the fourth gunsthan in our journeys in the past, and whether we have since then progressed any further, or have we have actually lost that samyaktva and gone down, we don't know. Ultimately, it's a subject that a Keval Gnani would know as to what our journey has been so far, and whether we have achieved anything in all these lives in terms of the spiritual progress of the soul as we're describing, or when in the future we will actually achieve that. So Sandeep is asking, can one achieve samyaktva in Devlok? Yes, one can. Simple answer to that question. So what happens even though the soul remains separate, but the karmas that are attracted and then they bind, when the karmas bind to the soul, the way it's described, let the karmas mix up with the soul like water mixes up with milk. So if you add water to the milk remains separate, the water remains separate, but they are mixed together in a way that you can't actually separate them. You can't actually see them separately. So like milk and water, they become one. And when that happens, that particular process is called bandh. Ashrav is in fact also bandh, but to explain and to understand this better, the process of keeping those doors and windows open, of engaging in those things which are not of ourselves, we are attracting karmas which then bind with the soul in this way, like adding water to milk, and they become part of that. So there is a karma body that then remains with the soul from life after life and carries on being modified. Now, the process of binding is described in 4 different categories. So when a karma is bound to the soul at the moment of that particular process of binding, the nature of the karma is decided. So that's called Prakruti Bandh. So what type of karma out of those 8 categories that we have in these slides that we are looking at, Gnanavarniya, Darsanavarniya, Vedaniya, Mohaniya, Ayushya, Nam, Gotra, and Antray. So the category of that particular karma or those particular karmas, and it is quite possible that with every activity we may be forming karmas of many different categories. So at every moment in life, we are constantly accumulating all those 7 karmas except Ayusha karma, which is bound only once during the lifetime. All the other 7 karmas are constantly being, the soul is constantly binding those. So that's Prakruti Bandh. So what kind of virtue of the soul will a particular activity, a particular karma will obstruct is decided at the moment that it is binding with the soul. And what kind of effect it will have, meaning what kind of uh, future benefit or disbenefit, future pain or pleasure, future knowledge or ignorance, all those things are decided at the time of the binding of that karma. So that's Prakruti Bandh. Sthiti Bandh. How long will that karma stay bound to the soul for? How many years, how many uh, lifetimes? All that is decided. So, for example, Mayur Bhagwan's karma that he acquired in that act of cruelty that he unleashed on this poor musician, the head of the music circle that was entertaining him in the life of Tripusht Vasudev. because he carried on playing after he had fallen asleep, having forgotten the particular instruction that as soon as I fall asleep, you must stop the music. So the musician forgot that, and Triprushta Vasudev, the king of three continents, woke up, and with the pride of his particular position, the power, he decided to punish this musician for his uh, act of carelessness. And this punishment was of pouring molten lead into both his ears. So he ordered his men to do it for him, but he acquired that very nasty karma as a result of that. And that came into fruition several lifetimes later in the life of Bhagwan Mahavir. And the same person that he had made suffer was born as this Gowal or Gopal, and he then wetted out the same or similar punishment to Bhagwan Mahavir. Obviously, the Gowal did not know why he was doing his particular action in this particular way, but his dislike and his anger at Bhagwan Mahavir for something that would have been very minor, and the extent of that punishment that he thought would be appropriate in his mind was all driven by the power of that karma that Bhagwan Mahavir had acquired in that previous life many lifetimes ago. So that is the Sthiti Bandh. Prakruti Bandh, Sthiti Bandh. How many lifetimes, how many years will it stay in abeyance? So until then, that karma is not doing anything. Until then, that particular karma is in status or stasis. And because it is a karma which is nikachit, meaning that it cannot undergo modification, that you are destined to suffer its consequences. So because it is nikachit, then it will not change, and therefore he has to suffer the consequences. So that is the sthiti bandh. Karmas which are anikachit, which are bound more loosely, are also constantly being modified by all our other activities, thoughts, actions, and existing karmas are also being constantly modified. And we will come to those different processes which are called karans that go on a constant basis, modifying other karmas. So some karmas which have been bound loosely can get further modified to be bound more solidly to a state when no further change can occur, meaning it can bind very, very solidly, guaranteed to give you, to guarantee to give the soul the fruits of that particular karma. And we talk about this in the Kalp Sutra about Tirthankar Nam Karma, and the description there in the Snatra Puja that we say, जो हो वे मुझ शक्ति ऐसी सभी जीव करो सासन रसी, ऐसी भाव दया दिल मादरी, तीर्थंकर नाम कर्म निकाचन. So Bhagwan, as Tirthankar Paramatma in the third life before they become Tirthankar, solidify, bind this Tirthankar Nam Karma in such a way that it is now then guaranteed to give the soul that particular fruit of becoming a Tirthankar. So that karma is now bound solidly, nothing can change that. So in a nikachit kare, that is how it is described there in the Snatra Puja. And then it goes on that particular sort of stanza, that particular set of verses, then goes on to describe the process that happens to the Tirthankar. वचमा एक देवनुभव करे चवि पन्नर क्षेत्रे अवतरे मध्यखंडे पण राजवी कूड़े. So Tirthankar's soul gets born in one of the 15 kshetras, Pannar Kshetre. So any of the 5 Bharat, 5 Airavat and 5 Mahavidya kshetras gets born in a royal household, and that is all described in the. So that is an example of a Nikachit Punya karma, of a great karma, uniquely superior to any other karmas, which guaranteed gives the soul the birth of a Tirthankar Paramatma. So, Prakriti Bandh, Sthiti Bandh, Anubhag or Ras, that is the third type of bandh that gets determined. Ras means how strong that karma is bound, not in terms of whether it can be modified or not, but in terms of the severity of the experience that it will give. So, whether it is a very severely bound karma and it will give a very intense experience, or whether it is not so intensely bound and it will give a less intense experience. શુભાશુભ ફળ આપવાની તીવ્રતા કે મંદતા એનું નામ રસ કે અનુભાગ. So, say if there is a particular karma of asata vedaniya karma and it has been bound with a very severe ras, then the experience that it will give the soul at the time of fruition will be very intense, will be extremely painful, because it's asata vedaniya. That karma will ensure that the soul suffers as much as the strength of that karma that he has bound before. If that karma is bound less intensely, then it will give a milder experience of pain or discomfort. But if it is bound very solidly, then it will give a more intense experience of pain or suffering. And similarly, it is with the good karmas or punya karma. The example here that's given is કે કોઈને શારીરિક વેદનાના ઉદયમાં શરીરને અશક્ત બનાવી દે, બીજાને તેવી વેદના લાંબો વખત ચાલે છતાં તેના સાતા રહે. Meaning somebody experiences the same disease. If you look at the variety of experiences that people have with the same disease, so if you ask 10 people who have had a heart attack, and I might say, oh, my pain was so intense and it left me with a severely damaged heart, and I ended up with heart failure for a long time. And somebody else might experience a mild heart attack that leaves him incapacitated for a few hours. He goes to the hospital, says, oh, it's a minor heart attack, nothing to worry about, everything will be fine, start taking these tablets. You go back home and they go back to their normal state of life afterwards. And with the same disease, the varieties of experience varies with each person depending on their particular karma. So the first person who experiences a lot of damage and a lot of problem has bound his karma with severe intensity, and the second person may have bound it with a milder intensity. And the last category of bandh is called Pradesh bandh. So Prakriti bandh, Sthiti bandh, Ras bandh or Anubhag bandh, and the fourth is Pradesh bandh. The amount of karmic material that gets deposited. So basically, Parmanu no Sanchay, Dal, Jatho, the number, the amount of that Pudgal, the amount of that material of Karma Pudgal that gets bound, that is also something that happens at that time. So at the time of the binding, different souls will have attracted different levels of that karmic material, and different levels or different quantities of that karmic material will be bound to the soul at the time of the acquisition or at the time of the binding of that particular karma. So a karma which is going to last for a long time would have a greater number of pudgal that are bound and attached to the soul. It says here that something like Vedaniya karma has got a lot of material, a lot of parmanu. Aishya karma, for example, may have just a small amount of karmic material or matter because it's a limited time of experience. Now, one particular example that is given in the Shastras about the binding of karmas is very interesting and will make it useful for us to understand this particular concepts that we've just discussed. I'll read it in Gujarati and then we'll try to understand it in English if for anybody who finds it difficult. શાસ્ત્રકાર પ્રકૃતિ આદિને લાડુના દ્રષ્ટાંતથી સમજાવે છે. પ્રકૃતિબંધ જેમ લાડુ સૂંઠનો હોય તો વાયુને હરે, જીરાનો હોય તો પિત્તને હરે, તેમ પ્રકૃતિબંધના કોઈ પ્રકાર જ્ઞાન ગુણને આવરણ કરે, કોઈ દર્શન ગુણને આવરણ કરે. બંધ સમયે આ પ્રમાણે જુદા જુદા સ્વભાવ પરિણામવા એ પ્રકૃતિ બંધ છે. So different types of ladus. If a ladu contains sunt, it has the property of reducing vayu, so vat, wind in the person's body. If that is a particular problem, you add sunt, and that will help reduce that particular problem for that person's health. If you make ladu with jiru, then that will get rid of the pith for that particular person. Similarly, the karmas that are bound can obstruct the knowledge gun or virtue of the soul, the darshan virtue or gun of the soul. Similarly, any of these other, any of the 8 basic virtues of the soul. સ્થિતિ બંધ કર્મ બંધાય ત્યારે સ્થિતિ સમય પણ નક્કી થાય છે. જેમ કોઈ લાડુ 1 માસ રહે, some ladus may be good to eat for a month, some may be just good enough to be eaten for 15 days and after that they go bad. And similarly, for example, મોનિય કર્મ વધુમાં વધુ 70 કોડા કોડી સાગરોપમ સુધી રહે. So Monia karma can stay bound to the soul, sthiti bandh, for 70 kroda kodi, 70 kroda kodi sagarupam. Okay. Other karmas may stay bound for less time. Anupag or rasbandh, karma bandhai tyare sub fad sup appa vadu. Pith. What is pith in English? It's an Ayurvedic term, Vat, Pith, and Kaph. Pith is like acid. So Nick is asking what is Pith in English. Pith is like acid. Acid. So Ayurveda describes 3 basic dosh for the body: Vat, Pith, and Kaph. Vat is Vayu, Pith is bile or acid, and Kaph is phlegm. In crude terms, the more detailed understanding of these terms as far as Ayurveda is concerned, they actually control everything within the body. And any combination of alignment of the Vat, Pitta, and Kapha produces diseases and gives us different levels of health or ill health experiences. So Pit is bile or acid, all that is called Pit Prakruti. These are examples from the uh, example of Ladu and how they help with health. અનુભાગ રસબંધ એ બંધાય ત્યારે તે શુભ ફળ શુભ આપવાવાળું છે, અશુભ ફળ દુઃખ આપવાવાળું છે, તે સમયે નક્કી થાય છે. Whether it is a good karma or a bad karma, whether it's going to give you good experience in the future or a bad experience in the future, that is ras bandh. Tem ladu ati ke alp madur hoy. So some ladus may be very sweet, others may be less sweet. Ke ati ke alp tikho hoy. There are some ladus which are made with certain products which are a bit bitter or may taste different. So you add less sugar and you add certain substances which taste bitter. એવો અનુભવ થાય. રસબંધ કસાયની તીવ્રતા કે મંદતા પર આધારિત છે. So the amount of kasai that you have exercised at the time of the binding of that karma, kasai meaning greed, anger, deceit, pride, krodh, man, maya, lobh, rag, dvesh, the intensity of all those feelings or all those vices that you have unleashed at the time of binding that karma decides on how what kind of ras, how intensely it's been uh, bound and what kind of experience will it give you in the future. પ્રદેશ બંધ કર્મ બંધાય ત્યારે તેના સ્કંદોને જથ્થો રસ પ્રમાણે ગ્રહણ થાય છે. જેમ કે કોઈ લાડુ અધિક તોલનો હોય, કોઈ અલ્પ તોલનો હોય. So it's a big ladu or a small ladu. That is pradesh bandh. Now, the other concepts that I mentioned about what happens to the karma subsequently once it is bound and the way things change or do not change. So there are concepts here. Bandh we have studied. Then Uday, when the karma comes into fruition. Sata, meaning the karma stays bound to the soul without it being rid of, because the time is not yet right for it to be brought into action and show its effect for the soul in whatever body it is to experience. And Udirana, meaning that the process by which the nature of the karma and its ability to give you any good or bad effect is then changed, that is called Udirana. And it goes on to describe, which we'll start off with next week, are the concepts of Sprusht Bandh, Badh Bandh, Nigat Bandh, and Nikachit Bandh. So we will study those particular aspects of the binding of karmas. So there's a lot more detail here. And we are going into the realms of the karma sahitya, the literature on karma. And in very brief, these things are described as part of the chapter on this particular tattva of the Nav Tatva, the Bandh Tatva. So that is where we will start off from next week. Let me look at the question. Okay. So same questions that I've answered as they appeared. Any other questions? Lots of new terms. Prakruti bandh, sthiti bandh, ras bandh, ke anubhag bandh, ane pradesh bandh. And then we're talking about bandh, uday, Sata and Udirna, that we will go into more details and we'll spend some time on understanding those concepts. But I know there are lots of new terms, but if you have any questions, please ask now. But if you want to write them down for next week, that's fine as well. Anybody?
I haven't received any questions in the chat.
Okay. Anybody wants to ask the question? Is this all making some sense? Or is it all getting too complicated? Anybody?
So I've had one response saying yes, it makes sense.
It makes sense. So it's not getting too complicated.
I do have one question sent to me by Lipa.
Mm-hmm.
She says the goal put the nail in Bhagwan Mahavir's ears.
Mm-hmm. The
This is
Gopal.
because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Gopal.
Yeah.
This is because of Bhagwan's previous karma.
Mm-hmm.
Did the Gopal bind new karma then?
Obviously, he was acting out a state of extreme anger, discomfort, and giving punishment to somebody who was completely innocent, who had left his cows in the care of without seeking his permission, without just imagining that I have now uh, given him while I'm going away into town, will you look after my cows? They're just roaming around here and eating, just look after them. So he is using Bhagwan Mahavir's presence there in deep meditation without thinking. And then when he comes back, he is extremely angry that the cows are not there, and he goes out looking for them, finds them, and then he's extremely angry. He's looking for a response. He gets no response because Bhagavan Mahavir is deep in meditation. He's only focusing on his true nature and his self, and he starts punishing him. Obviously, he's exercising a lot of anger, a lot of discontent. He's exercising at that moment extreme violence. He is being driven by the past karma, but while he is acting out everything that is he is doing at the time, he is obviously binding a huge amount of other new karmas. And that is what we do all the time. Whether we act out in response to any karma in the past, that process carries on because all those activities are there. So the process by which karmas are bound, the Goal was obviously exercising. So he is obviously binding new karmas for future punishment.
So, Ajit Bhai, just one more question. So, supposing this Gopal had sort of forgiven instead of being angry,
Mhm.
would the both of their karmas disappeared, or આપણે કહીએ છીએ કે ક્ષમા કરીએ તો બધું આપણું
Ha,
કર્મ બધા
yeah. But the level of that particular karma that Bhagwan Mahavir had acquired had guaranteed him an experience of extreme pain. The fact that the Goal was not ready to forgive, and the fact that Bhagwan Mahavir's karma was so intensely bound that it could not be modified in spite of all the penance activities, the tap activity, the dhyan, everything that he was doing, said that that wouldn't have happened. So certain things are inevitable. So it was not going to happen that the Gowal would forgive and be very benevolent and generous and say, okay, it's not your fault. I shouldn't have taken that liberty. But if there is something driving him as well, making him angry, and that is the power of the karma that Bhagwan Mahavir had acquired, and the Gowal is in a state of development that doesn't actually encourage him to become that generous. So that requires for the Gowal to become a much better and a much different person.
Okay,
But
thank you.
we don't know whether after he had done this, he then regrets his action. And then he says, what did I really do? Why did I punish somebody like this? What will happen to him with those nails that I have put in his ears? How will anybody get rid of them? Why did I do that? And if he had then regretted his particular action, I mean, I don't know, there may be a reference somewhere as to what happens to the Gowal subsequently in his future lives and whether he had any regret. Now, there is a similar example in Bhagwan Mahavir's life. We hear about Goshalak, who followed Bhagwan Mahavir without invitation and attached himself to Bhagwan Mahavir as his Sishya and took advantage of Bhagwan Mahavir's presence and the presence of the Siddharth Yaksh who was looking after Bhagwan Mahavir and learned from Bhagwan Mahavir the power of Tejolesha and subsequently became so proud of his limited achievements and his limited knowledge of Jyotish Shastra that he pronounced himself as the 25th Tirthankar and subsequently in one day when Bhagwan Mahavir is giving Deshna during Samvasaran, he comes around, challenges Bhagwan Mahavir that I am the Tirthankar, I am the 25th Tirthankar, and he throws this Tejolesha towards Bhagwan Mahavir. Tejolesha obviously doesn't have that power to burn Bhagwan Mahavir, but it goes around him. And this is after the Goshalak has already burnt uh, to ash I think one or two other munis who had come to challenge him. They couldn't stand there in listening to Bhagwan Mahavir being insulted and spoken to in such a way, and they challenged him. Even the Bhagwan Mahavir had told them in advance, forbidden them that don't do anything, but they did challenge him, and this Goshalak actually burns them down. But when he finishes with Bhagwan Mahavir, the Tejolesha that has gone round Bhagwan Mahavir and come back and entered his body, the Tejolesha burns him. And it burns him in such a way that his body remains sort of burning from inside. So it doesn't set him on fire, but it burns him from inside, and he only lives for about another 6 or 7 days. But during those 7 days, he regrets what he has done. He says, what have I actually done? And I insulted a great soul, a Tirthankar Paramatma, and he remembers all the good that he had experienced during his association with him. And then he tells his people that when I die, because that is inevitable that he would be dying very soon, when you take me to the smasan to burn my body, take my body to the smasan, make sure that you drag me behind a donkey, throwing insults at me as you are taking me out, making sure that there is no respect that anybody is showing to me, and announce to them what I had done so that it is obvious that I am not a good person and should not be respected. Because of his regret and because of his that penance during that time, his next life, his Ayushya, is actually that of, I think, if I remember correctly, that he actually goes to Devlok, but he will suffer the consequences of his severely sinful actions for many, 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 many lives subsequently. And there is a description of what is will happen to him in the Trisashti Salaka Purush Charitra and probably in the Kalpsutra as well. So that is the power of regret as well. And there are many such examples of the power of regret and how it can forgive. So that is pratikramana, basically. So that is why regret of an election of a sinful activity has its own power of reversing the effects of that. So Nick, thank you for your comment. You're saying that it helps you understand Jainism. Let me see if there is anything else. Okay. Any other questions?
So if usually in these stories that you mentioned, it's usually the soul which is hurt by the another soul usually comes back in another life, the same soul, reversing the thing. But if, say, from those two, one of them has achieved Kevagnan and Moksha, then in future life, if the soul has done something wrong to this other soul, then what happens? I mean, how is he treated in future life? Is
Well, it is not the association between different souls and how we are thrown together with each other that remains, and that is circumstance that attracts us together. But in the example that you are quoting, if somebody has already achieved moksha, that doesn't negate the karma. So if I have acquired a bad karma by punishing somebody, and my association with that person carries on in a subsequent life when he punishes me, and that carries on. But if you look at the story of, say, in Bhagwan Parshnath's life, of Kamat, who over several lives, from the first life when he was Bhagwan Parshnath's soul's brother in that life, and the enmity that he generates within himself. So he is the one who is holding the grudge. He is the one who has vowed, has accumulated that huge burden of hatred for him. And every time he sees this soul in any state, so there are examples of when in Bhagwan Parshnath's life as an elephant, this particular soul, not even knowing what he's doing, he comes and punishes. So as far as Bhagwan Parshnath was concerned, his soul does not retain any ill feeling towards it. He even as in fact has gone out to ask for his forgiveness in that first life. And this person Kamat, who is now a tapas in that first life, he is so angry and upset and hateful that he picks up a large stone and throws it at his brother, and breaks his skull, and he dies there almost immediately. But even while he's dying, he does not have any feelings of great enmity towards the person who has killed him, his brother.
yes, in this case, it's good in one soul
Also, and bad in the
it's
other soul.
always
Yeah.
like that. But
Yeah.
in case of Mahavir Bhagwan,
Yeah.
because Mahavir Bhagwan in his previous life did something bad to this soul, and in the last life it's other way around. But because Mahavir Bhagwan now achieves moksha,
Yeah.
nirvana, what
The
how
Goal will still suffer the consequences of his karma.
but from
But
another soul.
yes, from anybody, from in any position. So that particular act may have earned him a place in hell. And there the people wetting out punishment may be Paramadhami Devs in the upper naraks, in the lower naraks. It may be just each other. So souls just fight with each other and punish each other with no necessarily acute connection from previous lives. So it may not be exactly the same association. So that may not always happen. So sometimes we suffer not. So the person wetting out the punishment to us may not have any connection with us. He is just an agent who is delivering a particular sentence.
Yes, but this is what I mean. If
Yeah.
if the other soul is an agent,
Mhm.
who hasn't been done any wrong by this particular soul in
Yeah.
the previous life,
Yeah.
um,
The agent is still accumulating his own karmas,
his own karmas.
obviously, because he is acting out, and even if he is not feeling angry, even if he is not actually deliberately he doesn't have any association with the person that is punishing. If he is upset and angry, just because that's the way he is accumulating more karmas, obviously.
Right, because it's just that because when we did this book club, we did that book, the
Jailer.
first one. Sorry, Jailer, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a story in there, and we discussed these in groups, and we just said, it's the other soul is acting as an agent. So
So that is in relation to our reaction to him. So if somebody is punishing us,
yes,
somebody is causing something to us, then we should not be blaming that person because he's an agent. He's an agent who we may have wronged in the past. That is possible. He may be an agent that we have had no association with in the past, in a past life. However, in either situation, he is an agent because what is punishing us is our karmas. So that is the way it needs to be looked at
yes, but if he's punishing us, then obviously he's going to be punished in a later
in
life.
the future. Yeah.
Okay.
Every action,
Yeah.
nature does not ignore anything at all. Everything is formulated, connected, and the consequences, it is something that is set up in such a beautiful way that, I mean, we talk about this in the environmental thing, that if a butterfly flaps his wings somewhere very, very far away, that sets off a tornado somewhere else. So everything is connected.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I hope that discussion has helped everybody. I'll in many ways, it is actually simple. And I think it is, I mean, the rules are difficult to understand and grasp sometimes, but the simplicity is not always obvious. And practicing, as you say, is a task because that simplicity of being within yourself So the whole concept of I am the soul, I am separate from everything else, and I need to stay within myself. In many ways, that is a very simple concept, because Maro Swabhav શું છે? મારો સ્વભાવ જ્ઞાનાનંદમય છે. હું જ્ઞાની છું, હું બધું જાણું છું અને જોઉં છું. હું કાંઈ કરતો નથી અને હું કાંઈ ભોગવતો નથી. હું મારામાં જ complete છું. That concept is very simple. But the moment we try to hold that, my itch on my leg starts bothering me, and the mind focuses on that itch. I want to scratch that itch. I feel hungry, and I start worrying about what are the things that I could eat. Even though I know that it is not me who is hungry, it is my body, and it is when I start thinking of what I want to eat, I'm not just responding to my body, I'm responding to my acquired tastes of what I like and what I dislike. So in all those things that I'm thinking of, I'm actually acting and being outside of who I truly am. And in all those thoughts that are going through my mind, I'm accumulating karmas. And that process, even though it is very simple, as you rightly say, it is very, very difficult to practice. And because we have done that lifetimes after lifetimes, millions and millions and billions, trillions of lives in the past, and to unlearn and undo that is the whole point of what dharma is about. And that is what our Tirthankar Paramatmas, our Guru Bhagwans, our Sastrakars, our Ganadhar Bhagwans have been trying to tell us. It sounds very simple, but in many ways, I mean, there are brilliant teachers out there, a lot of our Guru Bhagwans, who have again and again tried to explain our true nature. There are books, and there are some great teachers who are doing classes on that. So, for example, Gnan Sar by Yashu Vijayji, Mahopadhyay Yashu Vijayji, is a book that is beloved of a lot of scholars. So I think Hitesh Bhai is currently doing classes on. So he's a Pandit, young person. A lot of people from this class are probably attending some of his classes on Gnansar. Gnansar is a topic, is a brilliant topics in verse form, the sastras that are out there, which are trying to teach us how to remain very simple. So in many ways, it is simple, but as you rightly say, it is very, very hard as well. And we find it very, very complicated because our focus is completely on different subject matter. Wishing all of us to regain our simplicity and wishing that we all actually digest this vast ocean of knowledge even to a small extent and progress in our lives. We'll say goodbye now. Thank you, Asmukh Bhai. And if I've said anything that is against the teachings of our great Tirthankar Paramatmas and our Gnani Guru Bhagwans, I ask for forgiveness. Jinagna Virudh Kaimpan Bolyo, Te Savi Manusan Kaya Kari, Tasmichami Dukudam, Swaramangala Mangalyam, Surakalyana Karanam, Pradhanam Sarvadharmanam, Jainam Jaiti Sasanam. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So,
Thank you, Ajitbhai. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajitbhai. Thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you.